Welcome to Thought to Action, brought to you by the London Centre for Policy Research. I'm Tim Wilson, I'm a Senior Fellow at the Centre, and my primary topic is the Second Amendment. You can find more information at londoncentre.org. With me today is Tim Furey, who's also a Fellow at the London Centre, and he has been a civil rights activist for many years. He works in the financial industry, and welcome, Tim. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself a bit.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate the intro. We have quite a few Tims on the call right now. And as you said, I'm a born and raised New Yorker. And although I've spent my career on Wall Street, I guess you would say, I've also had a passion for civil rights and the preservation of civil liberties. And one of the topics or the subsections of that has been particularly fascinating to me is to look at Second Amendment related issues, otherwise known as gun rights, and how they are managed within certain communities in large cities, primarily how low-income individuals, communities of color, and other subsegments are denied permits. And this is something that has gone on for actually centuries in the United States. It's probably the oldest form of institutionalized racism. But it also is one that makes people feel very awkward. You don't see almost any discussion on this topic. It's probably the most taboo within the civil liberties sector.
Yeah.
And you are seeing a little bit more of it being discussed now that the whole Black Lives Matter movement has come into full swing after the death of George Floyd. But it's still not an issue that's really come to the forefront. And I think part of it is that there's a lot of people that don't really understand the issues.
I am completely with you on that. I mean, you live in New York City, I live in New York State, and the contrast between the two is pretty stark. And New York State is already very restrictive with things like the SAFE Act. But Manhattan and its surrounds is even way worse, possibly, in my personal view, the worst in the country. And I understand that getting a permit in Manhattan and the surrounds is almost impossible. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Sure. New York is well known for being one of the most difficult places to get a permit in the country. I think that part of what we have to look at is not only the issue of, let's say, getting a permit to carry a gun in the Big Apple, but being able to even own one. And I have articles that go back for decades that talk about the rich and famous and people with a lot of money being able to get permits. And that's certainly true. One of the things that I guess you euphemistically say is that if you're not white, wealthy, or well-connected, you really don't have a chance. And being one of the 3 W's isn't necessarily something that will guarantee you a permit, but it's really hard to get one without. And so what I usually look at, or what I've written about, is more of just talking about the permits to even own a firearm. So let's put carry aside for a minute, because that's reserved for only the rich and well-connected, and that's been well documented, as well as the corruption that's been going on. A few years ago, for instance, the FBI raided the NYPD licensing division, as they did a few years before, and a few years before that. And I'm sure that that'll happen again down the line. But the issue of just being able to own either a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun in your own home, this is something that's been declared by the US Supreme Court to be a fundamental civil right. And so when you start looking at the restrictions on that, you start to wonder, well, how are they allowed to charge over $656 in combined fees for two permits? And require all kinds of other hoops to jump through. I mean, the pistol permit application itself is 17 pages. It's designed to be confusing and requires all kinds of things that we can go into in depth that are designed to really keep low-income individuals, people that don't have the ability to pay $10,000, $20,000 for legal representation, to deny them permits. And of course, naturally, this disproportionately affects communities of color. And what's amazing is, and we can go into the details on that, is that nobody seems to really dispute this. I mean, this all goes back to the year 1911, when the Sullivan Law was passed at the state level, which gave local police departments discretion to pass restrictions as they saw fit for public safety. And so this has been something that's gone on for decades. Nobody wants to repeal it. Nobody wants to address it. And it becomes a real issue within the social justice movement, because if you stand against institutional racism, you cannot then support a system that says the police, those folks that are, hurting people of color in the street, shooting them, asphyxiating them, beating them, and then turn around and saying that that same group will then equitably issue those same communities deadly weapons. That doesn't make any sense. But that's the way it is in New York. And, that's something that, we're hoping to shed light on.
Can I get you very quickly to just describe the process for getting a permit to have let's say a shotgun in your house in New York? And then if I could also get you quickly to cover, I don't know how aware you are, but obviously the murder rate has climbed recently. The shootings are climbing, and people, it's the people with the guns are the criminals.
Sure. So in New York State, this is kind of a bifurcated system in that pistols are covered by state law, with NYPD's ability to have their own say into what the restrictions are. But the whole rifle shotgun scheme, which is completely separate, you do have to have 2 permits, and you actually can be denied one and issued the other one, which is crazy. But the rifle shotgun is strictly a city concoction. So it's not quite as restrictive, although it's still, compared to the rest of the country, completely, outside the normal. But the restrictions for having an unlicensed, or as I say, an undocumented rifle or shotgun in New York City are far less than having an undocumented pistol in the city. But both of them require hundreds of dollars in fees, long application process. Folks just say, the issue of, well, you just have a background check. And this gets thrown around a lot, but the issue of what goes into that background check. And so in New York, they can use, let's say, traffic violations or unpaid tickets, or we're not even talking convictions, but they can even use arrests in which there was not a prosecution as a means to deny. So you can have, some kid that was falsely arrested in one of these, in a Brooklyn sweep, 10, 15 years ago, and then was released, and that arrest can be used to deny them their fundamental civil rights. And as we've seen, we talk about a lot with the marijuana issues, and how those disproportionately affect people of color. The ACLU has done nationwide research on this, and they've shown that nationwide, 3.64 times more likely to be arrested under a marijuana charge if you're a person of color. In New York, that goes into double digits. And all of those charges wind up going into these background checks. So all of that institutional racism that is, we talk about not only the police, but the judicial system, that all gets funneled into the background checks. And that's another thing that I don't understand, how there's not more of a discussion on that issue, because that's a blatant carryover from all these other important social justice issues. And then, of course, getting back to the New York City system, you have high fees, long wait times. You're sort of get a regular pistol permit in your house, the turnaround time by law is 6 months. The NYPD licensing division will go beyond that at their leisure. The New York state law doesn't seem to apply to them. And there's all kinds of bells and whistles that really make it so that if you're a person of color, if you're a person of just even a working class person, you're looking at about 5 days minimum of having to take time off work to go back and forth to the licensing division. I mean, this is crazy. That alone, I've had people who have said, I'm not gonna get a license for my gun. I'd rather own it illegally. Yep. Because I just can't take a week off work to do this. And what's shocking is that the system is actually a little bit easier today than it used to be. But it's definitely not one that's designed to promote the licensed and responsible ownership of firearms in New York, which should be the end goal.
My big takeaway from that is that the system as it is at the moment in New York City is driving people who would like to be law-abiding and are therefore probably no threat to anybody other than criminals away from the system, and turning them into felons, in fact, in favor of simply because they wish to be able to protect themselves from the criminal elements who do have access to guns, especially drug-related crime syndicates and the like, who have access to as many guns pretty much as they want, because if you can smuggle drugs, you can smuggle guns with them. And then there's theft from other places. There are plenty of criminal guns around in New York. The problem is all being pushed onto the law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, and to that very point, I think you're right. And I've actually, I support licensed and responsible gun ownership. But in the New York scenario, I would say if you're a young person who is black or brown, and you just want to own a rifle or shotgun, you are probably better off doing so illegally. Because it's something, if you just put away safely and then leave it there, and it's not something that a lot of people know about, you're more likely to get in trouble having your name in the NYPD system, so that if you are pulled over, if you are part of one of these sweeps, they now see that you're a gun owner, and now you're going to have 6 armed police officers show up at your house. And that's not an exaggeration. Right. And every 3 years, when your license comes up for renewal, if for whatever reason the officer in the licensing division doesn't, has these issues with racism, they can pull your permit and those 6 officers shows up. That's not an exaggeration. That happens every day in New York. And so you may actually be better off breaking the law.
Which is a very strange thing for the authorities anywhere to arrange and incentivize. Tim Furey, thank you very much. Fascinating talk. Thank you for listening to us on Thought to Action. If you're new to the show, please hit subscribe so we can keep you up to date with what we're up to. We are on thoughttoactionpodcast.com. Our YouTube channel is Thought to Action. And please feel free to comment. We really do read all the comments as well and take them into account. Please share our links with your friends. Or you can also visit us at londoncentre.org and find the links there. Please support us. Any and all contributions gratefully received. Thank you.